Hey everyone, what's going on? I'm pretty far behind on some of these posts in regards to making videos, but this post I made on December 5th, I definitely feel like it needs to be shared because I went back and I rewatched the movie The Number 23. And years ago, when I watched this movie, I had the average mindset when watching this movie. You see this movie and you see him doing all these things with numbers, and you think that what he's doing in this movie, he's just a crazy person. And they do things like that in this film. Like he writes all over all kinds of stuff. You know, he writes on the toilet, he writes on the wall. They do make him seem pretty crazy. And they even use gematria in this film, and that's what I talk about on my channel. I talk about how our media, our history, our sports leagues, and, among other things, it's all scripted by the system of coding numbers into words. And they make it look crazy on this movie as well. To get pink in gematria, pink literally just equals 23 in the small way of gematria, but on this movie, this girl says red and white make pink, and if you add up, red and white, R is the 18th letter, E is the 5th letter, D the 4th letter, 18 plus 5 plus 4, 27. And you do the same thing with white, and then she says that equals 92. And pink has 4 letters, so divide 92 by 4 and you get 23. But in reality, let me pull up a Gematrinator calculator here. All you have to do is reduce the alphabetic order. So P is the 16th letter. So in Pythagorean gematria, it breaks down to 7 because 1 plus 6 equals 7. And then I is the 9th letter. That doesn't have to be broke down to a single digit. N is the 14th. So 1 plus 4 is 5. And K, 1 plus 1, right? K is 11. 1 plus 1 is 2. So the small way, Pythagorean, it equals 23. You don't have to do some crazy method of, adding these two colors together and then dividing it by the amount of letters. You don't have to do that to get the 23. So they do make it seem somewhat crazy in this movie. But if you actually watch the things that are happening to him in the movie that don't even really involve numbers, just these chain of event things that happen to him in the film, it is exactly what I am talking about on tons of my videos. I talk a lot about how there's certain things that are connected to my own life that are connected to the media stories and to how the sports leagues are scripted. And I don't think it's that I'm some special person. I feel like anyone who applies this and they use their own life connections will be able to apply this to the media and apply this to other things, and they can learn from it. And I'm going to show you some examples at the end of this video of synchronicity and just some interesting things that I've noticed right after making this post. So I'll explain that in a little bit, but I want to show you some of the stuff that I noticed in regards to this movie. And before I even get into that, just think about Jim Carrey. So he's in this movie, The Number 23, that, to the average mind, it looks like he's a crazy person using numbers, adding letters, in numbers and whatever else. Jim Carrey's also the Riddler in Batman, and if you go back and watch that Batman movie in Batman Forever, he uses gematria in his riddles for Batman. He uses numbers every time. And Batman and Alfred figure that out, and then they figure out that the numbers that he's using are coded to letters. And they come up with M-A-H-E, and they do it in a crazy way on this here too, but M is the 13th letter, A the 1st, H the 8th, and E the 5th, right? And Batman says, well, 1 and 8 make 18. So then they figure out that it's M, and then the 18th letter is R, and then E, Mr. E. And then they say a mystery is an enigma, and the Riddler's real name is Edward Nigma, Enigma, and they figure out who the Riddler is. So, Jim Carrey is involved in movies that involve gematria, the practice of coding numbers into words. They put it right in front of your face. It's something that is used, and I have multiple examples, thousands of videos showing how our mainstream media, our movies, our sports leagues, our history, even my own personal life has these connections. So, moving on here. So, in this film, they want you to think that he's just finding the number 23 and he's creating the number 23 around his own life. But if you really pay attention to the movie, that is not so. The number 23 really does follow him, and he has no choice. It really is following him, but even this counselor guy or whatever says you're looking for it, so you're finding it. Possibly that is the case in some of the stuff where they don't explain where he's looking crazy writing all over the wall. But if you actually just pay attention to the movie, there's just so many things that it cannot be a coincidence. He's born on February 3rd, 2/3, and he says his driver's license number adds up to that, his social security number adds up to 23, things that he has no control over. And also, in the movie, he keeps running into this dog named Ned, and then of course Ned equals 23, but he's not making Ned show up in his life. He's driving down the road and he looks up and the dog is in front of him. That is just, something else. That is synchronicity. It has nothing to do with numbers, but it's connected to that number, right? He is not controlling this dog to come into his life randomly at certain times, and it's right at the right moment for him to notice something and him to build something off of it. So he's not making the dog come into his own life. He didn't make his birthday 2/3. He didn't make his he didn't make his social security number, his driver's license number add up to 23. He points out he was born at 11/12. That equals 23. He met his wife on September 14th, 9 plus 14. That equals 23. And they got married on a date numerology of 23. And later in the movie, you find out that he actually met his wife on the same day that he left the psych ward or whatever. He went into the psych ward for the number 23 stuff, and then he met his wife right as he was leaving this place, right? So it was not by chance that he ran into her when she was 23 years old. He's not making all of that up. So if you've never seen the movie before, I'm going to explain a little bit more about the movie here. So basically, in the past in this movie, Jim Carrey's character gets super obsessed with the number 23 and notices that the number 23 is everywhere. And he ends up killing his ex-girlfriend because of the number told him to, right? She writes him a breakup letter, and he circles every 23rd letter of her note, and it says, kill her. So he goes to her house to kill her, and, he's not making it up that she lived in apartment 23. He had no control over that, right? So he goes to apartment 23. Her note, every 23rd letter says, kill her. And the reason that he was mad about it or whatever, and it kind of built up to them breaking up, was because of one of these teachers here who even talks about the number 23 on the wall when he's in there. He's not making that up. He looks in there, he sees the number 23, right? It's all just synchronicity. And just because I talk about this stuff in my own life, that doesn't mean I'm some crazy killer either. I want to get that point across. That's what this movie kind of does. It makes you think that he's a crazy killer because of these numbers. But I'm not a crazy killer. I just noticed these patterns and I'm pointing them out. But so his girlfriend's in the room 23, and he murders her, and then he goes crazy, whatever, and he goes to a hotel, and the hotel guy gives him the key, number 23. I don't know if I took a picture of it. The hotel guy gives him key number 23 to the room 23, right? And he writes all over the wall, and he eventually tries to kill himself, and he jumps out the window, and he doesn't die, but nobody knows that he killed, and he gets amnesia. And nobody knows that he killed his ex-girlfriend. He doesn't even know that he did it. And they put him in the psych ward for all the 23 stuff. And then he gets out and he meets his wife, when she's 23 on the day that he gets out. And he just goes on and lives his life. And then a chain of events starts happening where he starts noticing the number 23 again, and it's coming back up in his life. And I'll explain that. So basically, this is how the movie begins. He's sitting in his truck, he's a dog catcher, and it's 1 minute before he's off. And on channel number 23 on the CB, he gets called out to a call. And he doesn't want to go to this call because he's getting off work in 1 minute. But the reason that the girl called him out on the call and made him go was because on the 23rd of December, he made fun of her at the work Christmas party. So it was kind of karma. And when he went to this, so she didn't like him or whatever, and she made him go on this call. And that call made him late to meet his wife, right? And when he got there, since he was late to meet his wife, let me find the screenshots here. So since he was late to meet his wife was like looking in this bookstore, and she found this book called The Number 23. And she had no idea that he wrote it, because on the book it says the author is Walter or Top Secrets, right? And she had no idea that he wrote it, so he made fun of a coworker, and then that made him late to meet his wife on his birthday, which is 2/3, and she finds this book on the number 23 that he wrote on 2/3, and she decides to give it to him for a birthday present. And then he reads the book and he realizes how similar the events that are going on in that book, how similar it is to his own life and from his own memories of his life or whatever, right? So all of that was just, synchronicity. It has nothing to do with numbers, but it involves the number 23. So it does. He's not creating that. That's what I'm getting at. He didn't create all of this to happen. It just happened, and it was all connected to the number 23. So he's not a crazy person, you know what I mean? It's just this chain of events that keeps happening. And by the way, all the chain of events that they talk about in the movie, it really began on that Christmas party on the 23rd of December, which was 42 days before 2/3, his birthday, right? Birthday in Gematria equals 42. So, they even use Gematria in the movie because birthday 42. The whole chain of events starts 42 days before his birthday. And so, moral of the story, he reads this book and he starts realizing all these connections to the number 23. And he made a fictional story that is about this detective named Fingerling. And I'll explain more about that in a second, because that's where all this synchronicity in my own life came up, because of these new, very popular toys for Christmas called Fingerlings. And I will explain that in a minute. But in this movie, then, he's trying to find who the killer is. He wants to know who the killer is from this book, and he thinks he's still alive and around. And he eventually tracks this guy down, because this guy was one of the doctors when he went to the mental hospital, and he got obsessed with the number 23 after reading the book that Jim Carrey had wrote in the hotel or whatever. And it's interesting because his wife goes to the hotel room that this guy stayed in, or this guy's office, and it's room 318, and his name's Dr. Sirius Leary, right? Which makes even more sense why you keep seeing the dog all of the time in the film. Ned the dog. And because Sirius is the dog star, right? Dog, God backwards. 318, I've talked a lot about how it's the supposed God number. If in the New Testament, supposedly Jesus' return is mentioned 318 times, and March 18th, 318 is the 77th day of the year in Gematria. If you write out Christ equals 77. And on the TV show Touch, they say that it's all about what I'm talking about, all these interrelated events. And there's a God sequence, and it builds up in each episode, and it begins with 318 and it ends with 318. It's this God number, special number that I've been talking about for about a year now. So interesting that it would be here, and then his name is Dr. Sirius Leary, and it's all about the dog star, right? And dog and God. And reverse gematria is absolutely important. God in gematria equals 55 in the reverse way, and Satan equals 55 in the forwards way. And notice them in the reverse small way. Satan equals 10, God equals 10 in reverse the small way. So it's absolutely significant. Dog and God, right? Makes absolute sense. But anyway, let's go back to this post here. And, I brought that up because in the film, when he's telling his wife about all these connections to his life, he even mentions the reverse, right? On his 32nd birthday, 23 reversed. So I just learned about how significant the reverse of gematria truly is within the last year. And they even mentioned reverse in this movie. So, that's why it's important that his name is Dr. Sirius Leary, the dog star. Dog is the reverse of God. And then I showed you how God and Satan even equal, they have a connection in reverse in gematria. Among other things. There's lots of other things. I'll leave some links in the description if you are still listening and don't know what I'm talking about. But lots of examples. So while reading the book then that his wife gives him, he also finds that the kid follows the dog to the neighbor's house, and he finds the neighbor dead on his 8th birthday, which is 2/3. And if you write out 8 in gematria, 8 equals 23, right? On his 8th birthday, something similar happened to him. I believe his dad died on that day or something. And then he goes on at the very end. So at the very end of the movie, he discovers that he was the one who wrote the book, and he's the actual killer, and he decides that he needs to pay for it and go to jail and whatever else. And something, he was having a bad time in his life, and the number might not be following him, but basically he brings up time, right? And a lot of this goes back to time. Saturn, the keeper of time, right? And think about just Jim Carrey recently coming out and, doing all these weird interviews and everything else, saying that he's not him and he's just a symbol of him and whatever else. It's all to do with time. So it's just funny, he brings that up, and he says time is just a counting system, numbers with meaning attached to it. And, just how funny. Just because that's really the world that we live in. Time doesn't exist, but we make it exist. And we do live in some type of matrix or whatever you want to call it. If it's just symbols, phi and the golden ratio and patterns in nature and whatever else that you're tapping into, or however it works, we're living in something to do that involves with some type of, code. So anyway, hopefully I got the point across. There was lots of things in this movie that were all about the synchronicity in his life and how it connected to the number. And that's exactly what I've been talking about. And it's not that I'm a crazy person and I'm a crazy killer. These things exist, right? He let it get advantage of him, and he did kill somebody in the movie, but that doesn't mean that everyone else in the world that notices these patterns is going to do that, And this movie is probably one of the most truthful movies I've ever seen in my entire life, especially now after learning so much more over the years. Absolutely the most revealing movie I've ever seen in regards to the things that I've been talking about for the last couple of years, And, I mean, just for example, last year I was talking about the Indians and the Cubs being in the World Series like crazy, all because it was connected to the area that I live in, and it was connected to the the Omaha Indians, right? And then I thought the Cubs and the Indians would be in the World Series, and just before the World Series, we started getting the Dakota Access Pipeline stories, right? The Native American stories just before the Indians are in the World Series. And anyway, on November 2nd, 11/2, and it was also the 112th World Series, that's when the Game 7 of the World Series came. And on that day, there was a shooting very close to where I used to live in Des Moines, Iowa, and 2 police officers got killed. And I worked at Burger King, and in Gematria, Burger King equals 112, right? And this was on 11/2, the 112th World Series. Right across the street from where I worked was the 1908 Drought Bar, like the beer drought. 1908 Drought Bar. The Cubs hadn't won a World Series since 1908, and they had a drought since 1908. And then what happened in the World Series? It started rain. It was tied, and whatever. It started raining, and it ended the drought, and then the Cubs won the World Series. So I'm telling you, there's events that happen in the media that are synced up to your own life, and you're supposed to see them. And if you pay enough attention, you'll see them. That's not the only example. There's been lots of other examples that I've shown that are connected to things in my own life. Anyway, there's other 23 things in this movie. I'll explain a few more of them here. And I didn't talk about a few of them just because, it is the movie number 23, and they do put some things in the movie that involve 23 that you could say, well, that's why they did that, because of the movie, and it makes sense. Such as, she finds that book that he wrote at this place with the address of 599. 5 plus 9 plus 9 is 23. He even finds out that he's the one who is the actual killer and the writer of that book, with 23 minutes left in the movie. So just some other things that I failed to mention, but there's lots of 23 references in the movie. Anyway, down here, this guy who's trying to help him, he says that he's telling him about how you can make 23 into anything you want, right? And that's what a lot of people think when they watch this movie. But he says there's 23 axioms to Euclid's Gematria, which is interesting. Euclid is a very important guy to the Freemasons, our whole nation founded on Freemasonry. And, people high up in Freemasonry understand this system, and they use it against us. So, very interesting. They would bring up Euclid. And, the Freemason square compass is set at 47 degrees, right? And Euclid has the 47th problem that's about creating the perfect square, right? The foundation equals 47. Talked about why Henry Ford, a well-known Freemason, he died on 4/7 of the year 47. Ford Motor Company equals 211, which is the 47th prime number. It's super important, so anyway, it's interesting that, they mentioned Euclid in regards to this movie and his 23 axioms. They even bring up that the Earth's axis is 23 degrees. And then he says, but it's actually 23.5. And obsessed people would say, well, 2 plus 3 equals 5, 23. And, but that's interesting because, 47, 23.5 plus 23.5. And then our tropics, once again, as above, so below. The Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn is at 23.5 degrees north, 23.5 degrees south. Euclid is the guy who founded geometry. Euclid in Gematria equals 108. Geometry equals 108 in the reverse and the frontwards way. So how interesting. Once again, all throughout history, this stuff is coded like this. In the movie, the detective character's name's Fingerling. That equals 223. If you just read out number 23 without the, that equals 223. The actual book that he wrote in the movie is called The Number 23, A Novel of Obsession by Top Secrets. That equals 223. And the film came out on 2/23, February 23rd. So super interesting. I also went on to mention in this movie, so the director was this guy, Joel Schumacher. When you look it up, it says that this was the second movie that him and Jim Carrey did together. The other one was Batman Forever, right? Both of the movies that involve Gematria. So how interesting. And lately, if you've watched some of my videos, I was talking about the Stand By Me theme that was going on in the media. And I mentioned Will Wheaton and Kiefer Sutherland. And then we got the Sutherland Springs church shooting. And then on Fox News, we got a story of Will Wheaton saying that even if people prayed, it wouldn't have mattered and whatever else, you know. So I'll leave some links in the description to that. But this guy also did The Lost Boys and Flatliners that's connected to Kiefer Sutherland. And he's also one of the guys that helped launch Kiefer Sutherland's career. And think about Kiefer Sutherland in regards to the TV show Touch that I've been talking about. He's the main character, and his son is the kid who can see all of the connections and help people touch. And by the way, his son is also in the movie called The Darkness, one of two movies I watched in the theater in 2017. The first one was Divergent, about, the futuristic world or whatever, and they are trying to go to Chicago and take it down. And then the movie with the kid from Touch, called The Darkness, is all about him stealing the Native American rocks, right? Once again, synchronicity. The only two movies I went into theaters about Chicago and Native Americans. And then we got the Cubs and the Indians in the World Series. Also, this guy, John Grisham, or Joel Schumacher, it mentions that he went on to, let me find it here. It mentions something about John Grisham. Oh, he later went on to direct John Grisham adaptations of The Client, A Time to Kill, a bunch of stuff with John Grisham, which in regards to Kiefer Sutherland and Stand By Me, it's interesting that Corey Feldman, the first person that he came out and said was a molester, was John Grisham, and people got it confused with John Grisham. So, just interesting, A lot of these interrelated things that I've been talking about. Jim Carrey's in it. There's been other stuff involved with Jim Carrey that had happened to me. I'm gonna skip over that, but you can check out my USS Fitzgerald posts, because they had the number 62 on the boat, and I don't even remember it all, but what is it? Marines equal, or not Marines, Navy equals 62, and they had the big 62 on the boat, and I can't even remember. I was watching that movie, Bruce Almighty, and his girlfriend says, "Why don't you just buy me a boat?" Right when I was looking at this story, and her name equaled 62 at Gematria, and I posted about it on 620 without even realizing. So, interesting. I also pointed out, I guess, earlier about the birthday. Birthday equals 42. Well, Saturn equals 42. Saturn is the keeper of time. Dog star equals 42 as well. So, something super significant about this movie. The chain of events start 42 days before his birthday on 2/3. And the reason that I put this picture of Mr. Miyagi and Daniel-san in the deal was, for whatever the reason, my TV was just, I never even turned this movie on. A lot of times I just turn on the TV and whatever's on is on. And the Karate Kid must have been on. And right as I typed the word birthday, I heard "Happy birthday, Daniel-san." And Mr. Miyagi was celebrating Daniel-san's birthday, which is just so interesting because my name's Daniel, whatever else, Just funny. What are the odds that right when I type birthday, the TV has a scene in regards to birthday and it even involves my name? I didn't plan all that. It just randomly happened. And I noticed it because I pay attention to these things. So, and I'm sure I miss a lot of things too, but Anyway, in regards to, so this character in this movie, in the number 23, the guy, the detective in his book called The Number 23 is Fingerling, right? And I made this post on December 5th. December 5th. I actually started watching this movie on like December 3rd, I believe, or whatever the Sunday was. And then I randomly just kept falling asleep, and I finally finished the movie. But the only reason that I even watched this movie was because I was tired and I got on Netflix, and this was the first movie that popped up. It said, you should check out The Number 23. And I thought, weird, because I really don't watch a whole lot of movies on Netflix. My girlfriend watches a ton, and she would never watch anything that was remotely close to something to do with this. So, just strange that that's how I even came to watching this movie again, was because it was the first one on Netflix. But anyway, I made this on December 5th, and on December 6th, I wrote a post on Facebook about, somebody had posted about Bill Cooper and how Alex Jones was a shill or something, and Bill Cooper was a good guy, and blah, blah, blah. And I wrote this big, long thing on this Facebook page that I got added to, and, I wrote Alex Jones 42, born on the 42nd day, InfoWars 42. But then I wrote a bunch of stuff about Bill Cooper as well, and it's just interesting. I wrote that on December 6th, and 2 days later, Zach made a video about that involved Alex Jones and, saying he's an Israeli shill or whatever. And this was on December 8th. So 2 days after I make this post about Alex Jones, I'm watching this video that Zach has with Alex Jones. And I'm sitting there, and my cat's sitting on my lap because we have a baby kitty or whatever. He's probably about, well, he's born in September. He's a little kitty, and he sits on my lap a lot. And I had to pee, so I got up and went pee, and I just left this video playing. And I came back and I sat down, and my cat was mad at me because I moved. And I was like, there you go, and to have him sit back on my lap. And right as I said, there you go, Alex Jones is like, there you go, or whatever on the video. And I thought, how strange that Alex Jones would say, there you go, at the exact same time that I say, there you go, to my cat, right? And I made a big long post about a whole bunch of stuff, but I pointed out there you go equals the same as Freemasonry and whatever else. And this was at like 3 in the morning when I had made this post, and I went to work and whatever. And when I went to work the next day, it wasn't, let's see here. I went to work the next day, and a few days before this day, I was at work, and my boss, or the lady who owns the store that I work at, asked me what I'm getting my daughter Claire for Christmas. And I said the only thing that I can think of that she really we hadn't got her anything really, except for I bought her a Sega Genesis thing at the dollar store. But I said I wasn't sure, I was waiting for my paycheck so we could go buy a few presents or whatever. But I said she really wants this thing called, or I didn't even know what it was called. I said some finger puppet monkey looking thing, and I saw them at the gas station a few towns down, but I didn't even see what they were called. I just saw what they were, a finger puppet monkey thing. And my boss was like, oh, you better get them. You said they're only $15 there, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, they look like something that would come out of a claw machine because it looks like the cheapest toy ever. And she went on to tell me how it was a really popular toy this Christmas, and they're going for like way over the amount that they're worth. And I was like, well, crap, we better buy one at that store before they run out or whatever. And my girlfriend drove down there on this day, December 8th, and they were sold out of them. And she texted me, and she said they're sold out of fingerlings or whatever. I can't remember what she said. And I was like, what's a fingerling? I don't even know what that means. And I was like, she's like, the monkey puppet things or whatever. And I was like, they're literally called fingerlings? That is amazing, because just the other night I watched The Number 23, and I talked about Fingerling. And, even in the book, he says, the Synchronicity, or the movie, he says, how many kids read Fingerling at the zoo, right? Fingerling. And I thought, weird. I'm going to look up Fingerling and see what that's all about. And so, moral of the story, whenever this stuff happens, I know that there's a reason that I'm supposed to see this. And I always learn something in regards to whatever I'm supposed to see. And so I went to Wikipedia and I typed in Fingerling. And, this is all that it comes up with. Barely anything. It talks about the number 23, the movie. And it also talks about this film called Pinkles, whatever, a 1978 Dutch film. And if you've been following my blog, I mentioned how there's something in regards to Dutch. I don't know what it is, but I keep seeing Dutch. And I talked about how in satanic gematria, Dutch equals 231, just like National Anthem and a whole bunch of other stuff, And I've been talking a lot about the Super Bowl this year and its connections to the kneeling and the death of Charles Manson and the helter-skelter theory. I'll leave some links in the description, but just interesting. It mentioned a Dutch film, right? And so I clicked on it, and when you go to that movie, it tells you that, where is it here? It tells you this, blah, 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 also in English as Fingerling, and it literally means fingering or little pinky, right? So, interesting. It's all about the color pink, or just pinky, pink, and think about the number 23, where they introduced gematria, and they show it in a crazy way, and it's all about the color pink, right? So, and there's been some other stuff with pink that I've documented, such as Pinky in the Brain, and we had the death of Bobby the Brain Heenan, the wrestler, and I talked about Pinky in the Brain in this post. Pinky in the Brain equals 261, and the big phrase in that is the same thing we do every night, Pinky, try to take over the world. That also equals 261. But anyway, Fingerling means pink, right? Or Fingerling means little pinky, and, in gematria, pinky finger equals 666, fingers equals 666, and I just knew there was a connection to Pink. So I looked up Pink, the singer, right? Pink, and would you believe that her first single is literally called There You Go. So hopefully that makes sense. I sit down, I say, there you go to my cat, right as Alex Jones says, there you go in the video. And then I go to bed and I go to work and I find out that these monkey toys are called Fingerlings. And then later that night, I look up Fingerling and I discover that Fingerling is connected to the color pink. That's connected to the number 23. And I look up Pink and look, her first single is called There You Go. What are the odds of that, There you go. It's mind-boggling, I never planned any of that. It just all randomly happened this way. And I've been talking a lot about Philadelphia again in a lot of my stuff. So I pointed out up here that Fingerling has, gematria very close to Philadelphia. 65, 101, 223, and 223. Fingerling equals the same as Philadelphia. I also pointed out that Pink is from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and musically she's out of Philadelphia. It makes me wonder if she's going to sing the halftime show or something like that as well. But I don't know. I just know there's a connection to Pink. It's absolutely undeniable. I say that to my cat. Alex Jones says it at the same time. Later that night, a bunch of stuff leads me to look up Pink because of the number 23. And Pink's, first hit single is called There You Go. And if you watch this video, it's really pointless. At the very end of the video, she's wearing a cowboy hat, which in early November I said there's a big theme, like one of the main themes that is going on. There's a ton of other themes that are going on in the media, but one of the main themes seems to go back to cowboy stuff. And Pink's randomly wearing this cowboy hat at the end of the video that really makes no sense in regards to the video. And on Wikipedia, they even tell us that on the video, she crashes this motorcycle through her ex-boyfriend's window, and her boyfriend's name is Floyd. Pink and Floyd. Pink Floyd, right? Pink Floyd is very significant since Donald Trump's been the president. You know, the wall, right? The guy who wants to build the wall. Donald Trump has a whole lot of symbolism to the moon as well. We had the closest supermoon since 1948. You know, the same year that the Indians had last won the World Series, the same year Israel declared its independence. Donald Trump loves Israel. Whatever, he wins the election just before all of that happened. Tons of moon symbolism. We had the great eclipse, American eclipse this year with Donald Trump as the president. Also, Donald Trump equals 48 in Gematria. You know, wall equals 48 in Gematria. And I just looked up Pink Floyd. Roger Waters seems to have some interesting connections. And think about Waters. That's the real reason I looked it up. Roger Waters. We just had the World Series that was all about the fire and water, the Los Angeles fires and the Houston floods. Lots of water symbolism going on. So interesting. And he's 74 years old right now. Seems like a fitting age for him to die, possibly. Be sacrificed maybe for the Super Bowl. You know, we'll see. But there's always more to learn in regards to this stuff. But I'm telling you that these weird synchronicity things happen. And if you look into them, you learn more and more as you go along. And I don't know. You know, eventually I'll figure it out a little bit more, you know. So I guess I just wanted to show in this video, I wanted to show all of these connections in regards to the number 23, not necessarily connections, but just the chain of events that are going on in that movie that a lot of people probably don't pay attention to. There's a big chain of events of synchronicity things that happen that lead him to find the number, right? And that is what I've been talking about a whole lot of times on all of my videos, is that there's these things that happen in my own life and they lead me to find stuff that is connected by the numbers, and I find all of these interesting connections. And it just so happened to even come just after watching the film The Number 23, and then all of a sudden I get this Fingerling stuff going on, and there's something going on with the color pink. And this is how I follow certain themes, and this is how I figured out a lot of stuff. Before it happens, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I have a good idea of a theme that is going on with the media, and then it comes true. So I just feel like other people probably have this ability and can apply this knowledge, and, you know, if more people do this and apply this knowledge and figure it out and help me out even, possibly we can completely figure out more of the truth of what this world really is and how this world really works and what exactly the point of all of it is, you know. So I guess leave it at that. Thanks for listening. Peace.